Welcome back everyone to the third episode of the Unreal Engine 4 inventory system tutorial series, and in today's video we will bring our player slots from the backpack location, like I said in the previous video, to over here on the right side of the screen. As of right now I only will have 4 slots, but later we will add more for our equipment and all the other stuff that I got requested to have on the player. And yeah, let's go to our UI folder and let's duplicate the item data for this, and I will rename this to be the player slot. And inside of this widget right here, let's go straight to the graph. Let's add a new variable and let's call this slot index. Let's make this into an integer, instance editable, and exposed on spawn. Now on the event construct, what we want to do is actually, let's leave it be for now. Let's move the construction script up a little bit. Let's do a cast to the third person character. Let's get the owning player pawn. There we go. And from here what we want to do is get the player slots. And from the player slots we want to get a copy to this slot index. There we go. Now once we have this, what I want to do is set the item to be this item from the slots right here, and then we can proceed with this thing right here. So let me move it out a little bit like so. So now let's actually display this on our screens. So to do that, I'm gonna go to the UI inventory, and here I'm gonna again add a new border. There we go. Let's rename this to be the equipment for now. I don't think we need this to be a variable. So bottom right, let's give this 2 by 200 perhaps, or maybe, yeah, seems to be good. So minus 250 minus 250. Then inside of here I want to add a vertical box. Make sure it's set to fill. Then a horizontal box right here. Make sure this is fill as well. And then I want to look for UI player slot, and then we can directly drag this in. It creates one of these. Let's set this to be fill, and then let's select a default item for this to be a empty item. Oh, it is an empty item. There we go. That's good. And the slot index is left at 0. Then what I want to do is duplicate this, and let's give this an index of 1. So this is going to be the first item and the second item, and between these I want to add a spacer. So in the middle of both of these, and give this some X, let's say like 5 perhaps. And then I'm going to duplicate the horizontal box with all of its content. So now I have 4 icons. And also let me add a spacer in between these two and give some spacing over here as well. Now let's select this slot right here. So we have indexes 0, 1, so we need a 2 and we need a 3. There we go. So we've set this up. So I believe this should be working good enough. Now let's make sure that we actually have everything that we need in here for our slots. So let's go to our third person character. And inside of here, what I want to do is select the player slots RI, and I want to add 4 elements to this so that they would always have something. And in my case, I wanted to have the empty items at amount 0 so that it always is filled up. So now if we press play, press I, you can see we have our empty items right here, 4 of them, and they also are getting displayed in here as of right now, but we're going to remove it later on. Now let's make sure that we can actually fill those slots with existing items rather than the empty ones. So in our third person character, we're going to do a lot of changing. The first thing that we need to do is create a couple of functions that we will add to this add item function. So first, let's create a new function and let's call this find stack. With this method right here, we're gonna find if we have already an existing item in our inventory. So let's add a new parameter to this. Let's call this item, and this needs to be the S slots structure type. Whoops, S slots. Then from here we can break the slots. Then we can also break the item, And then from here, what we want to do is actually drag in our player slots, and we want to do a loop for each with a break, like so. There we go. And now let's break the slot structure. Let's break the item structure right here. And what we want to look for is that this row name right here from the player slots is equal to the one that we are providing from the input, like so. Then over here in the loop body, we can do a if branch check to see if this condition is true, if both of those items are the same. And then from there, we need a couple of local variables. So the first one will be called local found to identify if we have found an item. Then the next one would be the local index, which will represent an index in the array where we found the item, and also local amount, which will tell us how many items are in that specific index. So let's set all of those on true. So set the index, the amount. So for the local found, what we want to do is just check this to be true. For the local index, we need the index from the array, and for the local amount, we need the amount right here that we got from this loop. Now, if we are on this true route, then what we want to do is simply go to the break, since we want to end the loop there once we have found the necessary item, so that we don't loop through all of the items that we basically don't need. Now, on complete, we can do a return. And here we again need a couple of outputs. So the first one is going to be the, let's call this success. This is a boolean. Then let's return the index, which is an integer, and we also need an amount. And then we can connect our local variables, so local found, local index, and the local amount, like so. So that's it for this function right here. Now let's move on to the next function. So new function, and this is going to be very similar. We're going to call this find empty slot. So with this one, we don't need no inputs. All we need is to drag in our player slots, and again do a loop for each with a break. Then from here we will break the slot structure, we will break the item structure, and here what we want to search for is that this row name is equal to our empty item. So empty, and if branch check from the loop body to make sure that we have an empty slot there. Then from there again we need a couple of local variables, so local found, boolean of course, and then we need the local index, which is an integer. Then on the true route of this if branch check, we're going to set both of these. So local found true, since we found something, and local index is the index from the array again. Then from here we can run to our break to finish our loop, and small reroutes right here to make it a little nicer visible. And from complete we can do a return. Now we need again two inputs. So the first one is, again, let's call this success, and a boolean, and the other one is the index, and we can connect our local variables, local found and local index. We are probably not going to use this in this video, the function that I'm about to create, but let's just simply create it in advance. Let's call this remove, whoops, autosave, remove amount at index. There are going to be cases where we already know that we have an item in a specific slot and we're going to know its index. So yeah, we will simply remove from that index. So the first variable will be the index, of course, that we need, and the other one is going to be the amount. There we go. So this is that. Now the next thing what we want to do is drag in our player slots, and we want to get a copy from this index right here. Then once this is done, let's right click on this output, let's split this since there are only two values in here, and what I want to do is get the current amount and do minus the amount that we want to remove. Then from this minus thing right here, what I want to do is do two things. The first one is going to be check if this is bigger or equal than 0, and the other one is going to be just simply bigger than 0. So first, let's do a if branch check on this one to see if it's bigger or equal to 0. And then from the true, we shall do another if branch check to see if this is bigger than 0. Now from the first false, if the value is not bigger or equal than 0, that means that this value right here is in the negative, and we don't want our items to go in the negative amount. So from the false, we can return. And what we want to return is an output, which again is called success. And this is a boolean. So in this case, this is going to be false. Since we fail to remove items, we don't have plenty enough over there. Now from this false right here, what I want to do is drag in the player slots again, and I want to set RI element like so. And let's see, so the index is the index from over here, this index right here, and we want to, let's split this. Let's leave the amount at 0 and let's make an item. And what we can do is select the item database and type in empty, since we have an empty item. And yeah, we need an empty item in this slot basically if we don't have an item. And for the true route, again, let's set RI element. So connect the true. And index is the same index, so let me actually just reroute this like so. And for the item, let's make this slots structure, and the amount is this current amount minus the amount that's required to remove, and the item is this item right here. So there we go. And from this one, from both of these, actually we can return success to be true. There we go, connect both of these, and that's that for this function right here. Now let's create a regular remove function. So let's call this remove item, since this one is going to be used a little more. And for this one we need an input. Let's give this name item, and this is the S slots type. Now from here what we want to do is find a stack first to see if we actually have this item right here. So let's do a if branch check from the success, and on false we can directly return failed. So let's return, let's add an output, and let's call this again success, and this is going to be a boolean and a false value. Now over here we want to do a similar thing from the true route that we did previously with the amount check. So let's do a if branch check. And so what we want to do is get this amount right here, do a minus, let's split the item structure and connect the this amount right here. So the current amount minus the required amount, and we want to make sure that this is bigger or equal to 0. So let's do a if branch check over here. And if this is false, that means it's below 0 again. That means we can again return false from the output. Now for the following part, it's again going to be very similar. Let's check if this amount right here is equal to 0. Let's do a if branch check to see if this is true. And again, on both of these occasions, we need the player slots, and we need to set the RI elements in both occasions. There we go, so false and true, and RI over here. Now let's see, let's split the item. Now we need an index for this, and the index is from the find stack right here. So index, and let's reroute this. Another index right here. So now for the bottom one, if this is false, that means it's bigger than 0. So for the amount, let's get this amount right here from the minus, and the item comes from over here. And for the other one, the amount is going to be 0, and again we're going to make the data table row handle, select a data table, our item database, and give this row name empty. Then from over here we can again return, and in this case again we're going to return true. So that's that for remove item function. And one last function that I want to create in this video is going to be the add item to player slot. Maybe I think that should be a good name for that. And this thing needs a couple of inputs. So the first one is going to be the item, so the S slots, and the other one is going to be the index, and this needs to be an integer. Now what I want to do to make life a little bit easier later on, perhaps if we're going to have a lot of routes here, I want to promote this to a local variable and call this local item. And for the index as well, we could have done this in the other functions as well, but I think this is very necessary to do this in this one, so it has less wiring. So local item and the local index. Then from over here, what I want to do is drag in the player slots, and I want to get a copy to this local index that we are passing along. Whoops, not set, but get. There we go. Then we can split this one right here, and let's break this structure as well. And then from over here, what we can do is check if this row name is equal to empty. See if this slot right here is going to be empty. I don't know if we actually need to do this check, but just in case, let's do this. But I think we are already providing this check in other functions, but you can never be too safe, I think. So now if this returns true, this is going to be very simple. All we got to do is drag in our player slots, and we can set RI element, and the local index is right here, and the local item is right here. So that's very simple for the true route, but on false this is going to be a little bit more complicated. So let's see, we are requesting the item from the local index, and what I want to do over here is drag in the local item. Let's split this, let's split this one as well, well, break this one. And what I want to check for is both of these the same? So basically whether the slot that we want to add an item to has the same item that we want to add. So let's do a equal between both of these row names right here. Let's do from the false, let's do a if branch check. And actually that's not gonna be good enough, because we have one more variable that basically determines whether we can put an item in a slot, and that is called can stack. So from this data table right here, let's get data table row. So connect this to the false, connect the row, and now we need to break this out row. So we need the S inventory structure break node. So let's copy this from somewhere, paste it in here, and then what we want to do is split this up open, and let's do can stack and this one right here. So basically what we are checking for is whether both of these items are the same, the one that is already equipped and the one that we want to equip, and also we are checking whether we are allowed to stack this specific item. So now let's connect the row found with the if branch check, and if this is false we can simply return false. And let's see, we don't have an output, so let's give this an output, and again a boolean called success, which returns us a false. And it's actually a good practice to return falses also from the rows not found, like so. But if you provide correct items in the game, this thing should never appear, and if it does, that means you specified faulty information for the pickups. Also what I forgot to do is over here we should return as well from the success, where we are adding an item, we are returning a success since we succeeded. And here on the true, if this is true, what we want to do is again drag in our player slots. We want to set the RI element, and the index is our local index right here. And let's see, for the item we should probably maybe make this structure to make life easier for us. And so for the item itself, we can get actually any of those. So let's get the local item from over here, and let's get the current amount of the item plus integer plus integer plus the local amount that is provided from the input. So this is the end result right here. It looks a little messy. It could be, I think, done a little bit cleaner, but well, I think it's pretty visible and it should work just fine. Now let's put all of these functions to work. Let's go to our original add item function. Let's move this aside. We're gonna work on it in a second. Let's promote this item to a local variable, just like in the other function, and let's call this local item. There we go. And one more thing that we should add in the inputs is another parameter called, in my case, I'm going to call this source, and this is going to be a string. Since we are going to add items from multiple locations, we might add item from our equipment to our inventory, from our inventory to our equipment, or from the ground to our equipment, or the backpack. Yeah. So on the source, I want to do a switch on string to do different things depending on the source. And for now, I'm going to add only one case, but there's going to be more. First one is going to be called ground, since as of right now, we can only pick up items from the ground. Now, from the ground, what I want to do is, since I only have the player slots, I will do find stack, and let's connect the local item right here. And then from this find stack, we can do a if branch check. If this is successful, then we can add item to player slot, since we found a location where we could add an item. And the item, of course, is the local item, and the index is the index from the find stack function. Then we can do another if branch check to see if we were successful. If this is true, we can return true. So we need an output. So this is success boolean, and return true, or we could simply just connect the success right here as well. It doesn't really matter, because if this is true, that means this is true. And the next thing, from the false over here, we need to, if we cannot find a stack, we want to find an empty slot. Then from over here, we can do a if branch check to see if we found an empty slot. And if we did, then again, we can add item to player slot. So from the true, there we go. The item is the local item, and the index is the one from find empty slot. On false, of course, we are going to return false, because we failed to do so. And over here, we can just simply, again, return, and we can connect this directly right here. So from this false right here, that means we found a stack, we tried to add to the stack, but maybe the item was not stackable, and maybe we have a different empty slot. So what we want to do is just go to over here to try to find an empty slot and maybe add to that slot over there, because we are never actually checking any other slots rather than the first one that we found. So yeah, this should be good enough. Let's compile and save this. And now we need to provide this source every time we try to add an item. So in our event graph, we have this e-event, which is giving us this add item function. So on source, let's type in ground, since this is going to come up from the ground. And here now we should do a if branch check to see if we were successful with adding an item. And only if we were able to pick up an item, then we can destroy our pickup. So now if we compile and save this, press play, you can see our slots are right here. Let's go, let's pick up some items, press I, and we have 2 pallets right here. Let's pick up some logs, press I, and you can see our logs are getting stacked in the same location. And now if we try to pick up more items, we can't. We can only pick up logs since they are stackable. So there we go, we have our equipment slots created. And that's going to be it for this video. And in the following video, we shall create some tooltips so that once we hover over our items, we can actually see what are the names, descriptions, amounts, and etc. So thank you guys for watching. Leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe, and yeah, see you guys in the next episode.